All basis. How we doing? I think we're up to episode 7 now, which is crazy. We might be at 6. Crazy. We're here, and it's been a good time. We got St. John's fresh off their win at the hands of Northern Iowa, 79-53. It was a great game last night in the opening round for the Johnnies. They get going. March is here. We're in the thick of it. So we're past the Big East tournament. We're past the Big East, and St. John's won both, which was great. And now we're here in this tournament, and it's exciting. I think a lot of us look at this St. John's team. Anyone that watched the game last night, it's Northern Iowa, but very good defensive team. Northern Iowa was supposed to be as a 12 seed, and St. John's rolled in as a 5, punched them right in the mouth, and they continue to be this bully ball team. Zuby Ejiofor had a night last night doing his thing, and we'll talk about Zuby a little bit more, but Zuby, 27 minutes, and he finished with 14 points. He had 11 rebounds, so a double-double for him. And he was 5 of 6 from the stripe, and he also hit a 3 at one point. He was left wide open. It was towards, I believe, the end of the first half, and he was just feeling himself. And that was kind of the story of the night for St. John's. They were feeling themselves. And you still want to see guys like Dylan Darling and Ozziah Sellers, 2 of their guards that should be playing a little bit better if this team really wants to get going. Because you know what you're going to get from Bryce Hopkins. You know what you're going to get from Zuby Ejiofor, the reigning Big East Player of the Year, most outstanding player of the tournament. He is the guy. And Bill Self, who they're going to play, he's the coach of Kansas in the next round. He coached Zuby when he was back with Kansas his freshman year, 2021-2022. Yes, there was a funny moment this week where Mike Francesa on his podcast said that Zuby Ejiofor was blocked by Joel Embiid, a guy who was last on Kansas like a decade ago. So clearly those timelines didn't line up, but Zuby's really playing good basketball. Rick Pitino has this team right where he wants them, and they're well coached. And you could tell from the way they answer these press conferences where I think they asked Zuby yesterday, like, how do you feel that your team has gotten snubbed? We talked about that on the last episode. We thought they should have been a little bit higher than a 5 seed. They get the draw out west to San Diego, and Zuby was like, that's outside noise. You know, we don't think we got snubbed. We're here, and we're going to play the opponent in front of us. So they certainly did that last night. Northern Iowa beating them by 26 points, 79-53. Good game. Good game. Bryce Hopkins played the most minutes yesterday for St. John's, 35 points, 35 minutes. He finished with 13 points. Good day for him. He still needs to be a little bit better. Some of these, wing type guys, it looked like at some points last night, Bryce Hopkins was just kind of standing there, and not in a bad way. It's just you're up by so many points. It does get a little awkward sometimes, but you have to stay true to the sets, the offensive runs, and the schemes that they have. And Ruben Prey, just shout out to him, kind of this backup big man that St. John's has, and he was really, really good last night, and his 12 minutes gave you 8 points off the bench. So good to see. Good to see for the Johnnies, and they'll be facing Kansas tomorrow. If just crazy of a game. This is what you live for when it comes to March Madness. A 4 seed in Kansas versus a 5 seed in St. John's. This is what it's all about. We talked about the Zuby Ejiofor connection. We talked about, of course, Bill Self being the coach of Kansas and Rick Pitino being the coach of St. John's. 2 really, really good coaches who have been around a long time. And you've seen that in this East region. John Rothstein calls it the region of blue bloods for good reason. I mean, you have Danny Hurley and UConn, who won last night over Furman, so they move on. You have Rick Pitino. You have Tom Izzo with Michigan State. You have Bill Self with Kansas. I mean, it's a loaded conference. John Shire with Duke as well. And we're not even going to talk about that Siena game very much, but that got close for the Blue Devils to open the tournament. So certainly it's been a fun March Madness to begin. And the game for me that stood out outside of all this, because there's so many games we could talk about, so many different, High Point doing what they did, or Ohio State losing to TCU. You generally look at this bracket right now, there is not really many double-digit seeds left. That's just the reality. Right now, you have, based on the seeds, the lowest, you have an 11 in VCU that has moved on. And we know VCU very well, being here at Fordham and going to the A10 and seeing VCU up close a lot of these past few years. NIL has definitely benefited VCU, no doubt about it. Fordham, you would hope that that's the case, but it's still playing catch up a little bit. Also, just quickly shouting out the A10, St. Louis. St. Louis putting on a show in their first round against Georgia, beating the brakes off of them 102-77. So that's a good representation for the A10 for sure. And then the other lowest seed, Texas, is an 11 and High Point's a 12. So that's kind of where we're at. There's no 13-seeded Hofstra, unfortunately, that looked good yesterday against Alabama down there in Tampa. But they just couldn't get it done. And that's kind of what these teams, they look good early. Looks like an upset. Certainly Siena versus Duke. Anybody that was watching that game going into halftime, Duke was down double digits. I don't believe a 1 seed has ever gone into halftime at any point in the tournament down double digits at halftime. Duke was. They came back without Caleb Wilson. Like, they got to give credit to them. You know, Boozer is an absolute beast. And listen, if you're St. John's, because I know we're a New York-based podcast, we're looking out for the intentions of St. John's before any of these other teams for sure. You're going to face a Duke if you could beat Kansas and Duke can beat TCU. So it's going to definitely get to the point where you're going to be tested. And these double-digit seeds probably are not going to go much further. So it's good. We're here in March, the magic of March. I just wanted to quickly shout out the Kentucky game yesterday, which I don't even know how Kentucky truthfully won this game. They beat Santa Clara 89-84, but before any of that happened, they went into overtime. And anyone that saw the game knows Santa Clara comes down, they hit a 3, silky nylon, right wing 3, beautiful. Game looked like it was over. And then Kentucky comes down the court. We found out after the fact that the coach of that Santa Clara team was calling timeout, but that's neither here nor there. They didn't give it to him. Next thing you know, Kentucky comes down the other end. It's a miracle shot. Absolutely miracle shot. It was Kentucky star Otiga Owe. He had a miracle 3 buzzer beater. Those Broncos in Santa Clara, man, that was a pesky game from the beginning. I thought Santa Clara was going to win. I picked them in most of my brackets. It kind of stinks what Kentucky has been, but yeah, it's definitely not the same Kentucky that when John Calipari was there and they had just first round picks out of the wazoo. But good game for them. I don't expect Kentucky to go much further. I don't truthfully think they're that good of a team, especially when you're facing Iowa State coming up. That's not good. I want to share this bracket, and then I just kind of want to just give you guys some of the visual stuff at home. We'll bring in Ben too for his, March Madness games that he's seen so far. But this is kind of what the bracket looks like as of now. We have second round games that are beginning today. You're going to see Duke go back at it. Louisville, Michigan State should be a good one. Tomorrow night, UConn, UCLA going to be a good one. But this is the game right here, everybody. I think most people in the country are looking at St. John's, Kansas as this huge game because there's not really any other big games. Like Arizona's going to wipe Utah State. Unfortunately, Arizona wiped Long Island. Ben and I both from Long Island. We were hoping that the LIU Sharks could get it done, but no, Rod Strickland's squad got sent home. Same thing with Speedy Claxton's squad and Hofstra down there in Tampa, as we said before, 90-70. It was close at one point. Hofstra was actually winning, I believe, by 10. Like it got to that point in the first half, and then they couldn't sustain it. Miami, Ohio miracle run is over. Virginia, really good team facing up against Tennessee. But do any of these matchups really excite you outside of St. John's and Purdue and Miami, Texas, Gonzaga? Like, okay. But to me, St. John's, Kansas, everybody. But let's bring in Ben. Want to hear all of his thoughts from the first round, second round. We're getting ready. And Ben, hope all's well with you, dude.
Dan, can you hear me? We had some technical issues beforehand.
I can.
All right. Very good. Happy to hear that. And just want to get right into it. Just all of our listeners for the round of 64 for the first day, the first night, if you will, I had every matchup correct except the High Point Wisconsin game, which I will add, by the way, had an incredible finish that was narrated in the most epic fashion possible by the High Point student broadcasters. I'm sure you saw that video, Dan. It was going viral all over Twitter. And that's what, being a student reporter, student journalist, student broadcaster is all about in this industry. I hope those guys land somewhere coming out of graduation this year. I'm assuming they're seniors, and they're going to have a bright future, especially that color guy. People were saying, or excuse me, the play-by-play guy were saying he was channeling his inner Jim Nance on that three for High Point. But yeah, so I had a lot of my picks correct the first day on Thursday. The only pick, as I said, that I had wrong was High Point and Wisconsin, which no one really expected. But then yesterday is when I just got battered and bruised, and my bracket got truly. I mean, it was busted just because of the High Point game, but my bracket got truly busted out of any sort of order or resemblance of accuracy yesterday. I had, unfortunately, I picked. Now I wasn't unrealistic enough to pick LIU to beat Arizona, which would have been fun, but I was trying to be semi-realistic with this bracket, Dan. Even though we're both Long Islanders, but I genuinely had Hofstra beating Alabama. I talked to you about that. And I'll tell you what, Dan, I was watching in the background while I'm logging a spring training game at MLB Network, and all my coworkers have the games on in the background. So it wasn't like I was doing anything against the rules. Obviously, get my work done at the same time. But the game is on, and Hofstra was up as much as 10 with around 5 minutes to go in the first half. They were playing great, especially great defense. They were forcing Alabama to take a lot of bad shots. They were forcing Alabama to force their shots. And then, I didn't watch much towards the end of the first half, and I barely saw the second half at all. But it looks like Alabama just they kind of refound themselves, and their explosiveness couldn't be contained by Hofstra. And it's unfortunate. I was also reading before the game, Hofstra has a great defense, but every time they let up more than 77 points to their opponent, they almost always lose, at least this season. So it's disappointing. I thought Hofstra had a legitimate chance, and for a lot of that first half, Dan, it looked like they did have a chance. It looked like they were in control of that game. And shout out to Speedy Claxton and what he's done with that program. Obviously being coached by Jay Wright, as we can see there, Dan. And Jay Wright, it's cool that he was a coach at Hofstra at one point. And obviously we know his history. So Hofstra, it's kind of been, they talk about that term sleeping giant. They use that term even for Fordham a couple years back when we had one great season. But I say Hofstra is a true example of a sleeping giant. I mean, this is a program that's right outside of New York City. It's in Nassau County in Long Island. It's got a great head coach. It's got a program with people who have good judgment, good heads on their shoulders, who are trying to recruit, guys who, maybe they could go to a better program, bigger program. But at Hofstra, that's what Speedy Claxton is trying to recruit, guys who, maybe could do a little bit better in other programs and other schools. But at Hofstra, that's where they develop and grow and blossom. And that's part of why the program has been so great this year. And also, I just want to mention in 2020, they also made the tournament.
Yeah.
But it was obviously canceled due to COVID. And what I thought was so nice is they invited the head coach of the 2020 Hofstra team. I believe his name is Joe Mihelich. Yes, I believe Joe Mihelich of Hofstra. Yes, Joe Mihelich of Hofstra. And he was the head coach from 2013 to 2021, and he built that up there. He was a good head coach, and they invited him to this year's March Madness down in Tampa against Alabama. So
he's like the Tom Thibodeau of
yes, exactly. So it was nice. And ideally, Dan, this is a whole nother conversation, but I'd like the Knicks to include Tom Thibodeau in championship celebrations if the Knicks ever host the Larry O'Brien Trophy. I truly believe that, but that's a whole nother conversation.
We'll get to the Knicks. We'll touch on them as our third base here. But before we get to that, let's finish up with the March Madness stuff. This tournament continues to roll on, Ben. Any teams that kind of shocked you that you think could go pretty far that you didn't think otherwise could go pretty far?
That's a good question, Dan. I would say right now, even though we are Fordham guys and we kind of we have a chip on our shoulder when we look at them, but VCU really impressed me. I know you mentioned VCU briefly. They really impressed me in that win over UNC. And obviously, since my uncle was a Duke law grad and he raised me a de facto Duke fan for basketball, at least. I grew up, I think I told you, Dan, watching that 2015 team with Jahlil Okafor, Justice Winslow, Tyus Jones, that 2015 team at Wisconsin. I grew up with that team. That's the only team I've been a fan of, Dan, that's won a championship in my lifetime. It's crazy to say. But I will say, VCU beating UNC, that was sweet. And that was a huge comeback too. 19 points, I believe, Dan. And VCU is very well coached. I've seen their, I used to manage for Fordham. I've seen VCU in action. They are quite a serious program. And also shout out to VCU's head coach, Phil Martelli. Phil Martelli Jr., you may have seen this, Dan. He was giving a shout out to these student reporters for what they do, saying, you guys are here doing this for free out of sheer passion for this field, for this industry, for this game. And he was basically saluting them. And, you don't see that often. Sometimes head coaches can be apathetic or even hostile to even young reporters or student reporters, and obviously you don't want to see that, but that was very heartwarming. It's very nice of Phil Martelli, who's a great coach, it's also been his first season leading VCU following his tenure at Bryant. He's the son of longtime college coach Phil Martelli, so better refer to him as Phil Martelli Jr. And so that was great. That was a great moment post game with the reporters. But VCU, that was quite impressive, that 19-point comeback. And I also just want to add that UNC, Dan, UNC, they just look lost out there, especially with their head coach Hubert Davis. I'm not sure what that press conference was. I'll just say that. I'm sure you saw the same thing, Dan. It was honestly kind of humorous. I'll say that. But,
it's a joke, man.
Yeah, no, it was honestly, it was very unprofessional. And I'll also say what another thing to add with Villanova, that was kind of weird too, saying mid-game for the Villanova head coach, his name is escaping me. I'm sorry, Dan?
Kevin Willard.
There it was. It was on the tip of my tongue. Kevin Willard, he said during the middle of the game, I'm not sure, it was probably in the first quarter, the first half, saying, I'm going to fire my staff. It's like, even if you're saying that as a joke, even if your adrenaline's pumping and you're under pressure, it's like, that's just, that's not a kind of joke. That's not a thing to joke around in my view. But yeah, I will say, going back to VCU, looking at KenPom, Dan, they have the 46th best offensive rating in the country, the 54th best defensive rating. Pretty solid all around. I think VCU can go far. I think they're going to beat Illinois. That's my pick. That's my upset pick for this round of 64. You heard it from me.
I'm right, Ben. I'm honestly kind of there with you. VCU, really good team. Just in terms of NIL, I think they've kind of been a step up in their own conference, which gives them confidence that they can beat anybody in the country. And there's a growing narrative too with NIL that it's separating these big teams like a Duke from, say, even a Siena. Like that gap is growing now because all these kids are flooding to where the money is in these big schools. Why would you go to Fordham when you can go to VCU and make more money doing it, right? So that's kind of what we're seeing. But these mid-major schools, you can't mess with them. Really, really good programs that they have. So, and you're right about that Kevin Willard stuff. It was weird, but just kind of knowing Kevin Willard from his days at Seton Hall when he coached before.
That's right.
And he was always kind of just like that jokester kind of guy, but you got to be kind of read between
time and place, Dan.
Yeah, you got to be better with that, I think. Yeah, and you gotta there was ways you could have said it. You could have been like, hey, I'm thinking about firing these guys if we don't get going soon, something like that.
Yeah. It depends. I'll just add, Dan, it depends on the tone and the cadence of how you say it and the way he said it. I'll just say that you could find a way to say what he said, Dan, without making it a controversy. But the way he said it made it sound like he actually, wanted to totally reshuffle his whole program, his whole staff, which is one thing I'll just say. If you're doing stand up, you don't want to make it the joke so serious that the crowd, the audience is awkwardly looking around like, where's the punchline? And that's the kind of vibe you felt in that brief in-game interview with Kevin Willard.
No doubt. We'll see who goes on and wins. We have games that are starting in 7 minutes from now. We're recording this on Saturday, a little before noon, and we got games going about now 12:10. So those games going to get going. St. Louis and Michigan representing the A-10. We'll see what happens for them. Who's cutting down the nets? We'll have you covered. We'll hopefully bring you some episodes as these kind of rounds move on. We thought today was a good day to talk about March. We'll probably talk again after the second round. So maybe Monday or Tuesday, just kind of resetting, because then you get a 4 or 5 day window before next weekend when the Sweet 16 and then the Elite Eight get going. So we'll see how the Johnnies go. Big game for them against Kansas. We'll see what happens tomorrow at 5:15 out there in San Diego. Anyway, real quick too, I like UConn. Still can't count out UConn. I know some people have been looking at them as a real team to win it all too. Let's move on quickly with the football. Didn't want to spend too much time on it, but we did have some football news. Abdul Carter, he will be changing his number from 51 to number 3 this year for the New York Giants. And it's not like the biggest news in the world. Obviously, they've gotten guys from the Ravens. Greg Norman really wants to establish a running game for the Giants, bringing a fullback for them. Guys like that, Juszczyk for me, likely as well, tight end. Patrick Ricard, excuse me. So they're bringing in Ravens guys that are getting the job done, hopefully, but that's kind of the new identity of the Giants. They're going to be ground and pound this year. The Jets, I know there was some moves with trading Justin Fields to the Chiefs. Surprised that they were able to do that and get, I believe, a 6th rounder for him or whatever it was. But again, good moves. Jalen Waddle to the Broncos. There's been some moves all over the board, but for the New York locals, this is kind of one of those big stories because there was a lot of pushback when you have a guy like Abdul Carter when he wanted to make his number Lawrence Taylor's number. And that was a whole thing. Of course, you cannot take Lawrence Taylor's number 56. He tried, but obviously that is not appropriate when you're thinking about who the player that he is versus the player that, of course, Lawrence Taylor was. But that's our quick little note here on the Giants. We'll bring you anything else as the season gets going. We'll get training camp going. We got the draft coming up in about a month, so a lot of people getting excited for that and what will happen. Let's go to the Mets and the Yankees. There was some news with the Mets and the Yankees this week. So we're getting ready for the season, right, Ben? We are now, it's crazy to say that opening day, less than a week away. It is opening up on Wednesday for the Yankees and the Giants. And then you will have the Mets going on Thursday. But Carlos Mendoza has now let us know what the rotation is going to be. So I'm just going to pull up. Let's do our due diligence here. Give credit to SNY. Not going to be, too. I did tweet this as well, but I'm not going to take credit for it. And SNY. So Carlos Mendoza basically laying out the land for what the rotation is going to be. It's going to be Freddie Peralta taking the ball opening day. Right? Very simple. And after that, gets a little tricky. So here's the tweet. You guys can read it, of course. To begin the season, this is going to be the Mets rotation. I don't agree with it. Just want to be very open and honest, but we'll get into the reasons why.
I want to hear that. I want to hear why you disagree.
Freddie Peralta is the opening day starter. No problems whatsoever. He is going to be the person that takes this ball. He's going to be the ace to begin the year for the Mets. You trade 2 top prospects for the guy. We've had our eyes on Freddie Peralta for a long time. We know what he brings to the table, and we're happy that he's a Met. So you're going to be the opening day starter. No problem. David Peterson is going to begin the year as the Mets' second best starter. Is that true when we start hitting the postseason? No, I don't think David Peterson is in the top 4 in this rotation. But with that being said, Dan, who is better than David Peterson? For me, it's Nolan McLean. It's not close. Like, I've said on all of the bases a couple times that the Mets 1-2 punch is Peralta and McLean, and I think most Met fans agree. But why are you putting a lefty in the middle of them just to break it up? I think it's very simple because Manaea is not in here, as you can tell. Where is Sean Manaea? Sean Manaea's velocity has been down. If his velocity was up, it's without a question. If you want to break up the lefty righty, it's not Peterson as the second best guy. It's Manaea. But Manaea struggled this spring. He's definitely not been the one that you've looked at and said, oh, he's gotten better. The bone spurs in the elbow, I think that's playing into a part of this. So for me, Peterson going 2, I don't love it, but it is what it is just to break the guys up. Then you have Clay Holmes going Monday, and you have Kodai Senga, your guy, Ben, going on Tuesday. So that's kind of the beginning of the year. Carlos Mendoza said regarding Sean Manaea, he's going to be in a piggyback role for the first 2 times through the rotation. So, yeah, we'll see where he slots in. But quickly on Senga, too, and then I'll pass it over to you, Ben. Juan Soto had some comments talking about Kodai Senga this week, and he said, quote, "That's our ace." Ben, is Kodai Senga your ace?
100%, Dan. And I say that completely unironically. I'm being totally serious right now. I'm not just saying this in jest. Kodai Senga has been my favorite, not just my favorite pitcher on the Mets rotation and their staff, but he's also been my favorite Met as a cult classic since 2023 when he was signed. I was always hoping they would sign him in the 2022 offseason. Then he had a solid 2023, Dan. That was a very solid year. He had an under 3 ERA. And then 2024, unfortunately, he only played a couple of games. The time he came back in July, which ironically was a game I went to that year in 2024, he got injured for a routine. I believe it was like a out at first kind of play.
Well, Pete, yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah. And it was very disappointing. Then they brought him back for the postseason in 2024 against the Dodgers. And I just felt terrible because this guy, he wasn't fully prepared. I think they kind of just put him in there, and it was at LA, and he just got totally clobbered. If you remember, Dan, I believe it was game 6, the last in that series against the Dodgers, and Senga really struggled against that Dodgers lineup. And honestly, who wouldn't in that situation? Again, still getting your bearings and still getting your sense of routine back as a pitcher. He didn't get in the flow state, if you will, in 2024. 2025, Dan, I keep saying this, the first half of 2025, ironically, up until he got injured again in that game, I believe it was June 13th of 2025. I remember that specifically, Dan, because it was against the Nationals, and I was there for that game. It was a crowded day game, and the Mets were far and away the best team in baseball. They had a record that was like 20 games over 500, and it looked like they were cruising, and Senga was starting on that Thursday day game. I believe it was a Thursday. And since during that game, Dan, it was another routine defensive play. I believe it was like out at first, again, like a grounder or something like that. And, he runs the first, and then like he's limping a little bit, and it's like, oh, he's injured. And I could sense it was palpable, Dan, the change in the vibe of the whole Mets season from that point when Senga got injured. From that day in mid-June, Dan, the Mets season was never the same. Now, I'm not obviously blaming it on that specific incident, but it was something after that mid-June stretch, Dan, where the Mets they never recovered. And with Senga, it was really disappointing because he never recovered that sense of routine that he was having, because he was having an excellent year. He was having an all-star caliber season. Arguably, some would say this is crazy, but maybe in the honorable mentions for NL Cy Young in the beginning of last year. In honorable,
no doubt. He was a runaway.
I'm not saying that he was the guy who would have won it, but he was having a very good season up until that game, and then he got injured again. Now, on the positive side, I will say that this spring, he has been very solid, and you got to admit that he's dropped the spring ERA to 1.86 in 3 starts. He's struck out 11 in his last 9 2/3 total innings. Opponents are hitting just 176 off him in camp. And Thursday's outing, he had it actually followed up a perfect 3 innings against the Marlins on March 13th. And he's also averaging the same mile per hour on his fastball. 94.7 miles per hour. That's the same as his numbers in 2025. I think he's feeling good. And I think the way that he has been that he has been seen by a lot of Mets fans, then, and no offense, even some members of the organization, I think it's kind of disrespectful that he's 5th in this rotation. I think he should be 3rd. You know, I think there's an argument to be made there. I understand he's had a shaky past 2 years or so with everything that's going on with the injuries, but we've seen him when he's on, he's on. I mean, 2025, just saying it one more time, he had at one point in that first half of 2025, 1.47 ERA in 13 starts with a 24% strikeout rate. And again, so I got the date. I was off by 1 day. It was he strained his right hamstring while covering first base, as I mentioned. That was on June 12th. He was leaping for a high throw from Alonso, and then he left the game immediately after. And it was just never.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt, man. Ended their season. Senga was great last year, and if he can continue that, dude, the sky's the limit for the guy, no doubt. So we'll see what happens with the Mets. Yankees. We have a week until they begin, and they got a team, no doubt, and they have a team that's pretty good. But there's one player that I'm looking at specifically that has not been very good. That's Ryan Weathers. Ryan Weathers is supposed to be the second lefty in this rotation to begin the year. You have Max and you have Ryan Weathers. Carlos Rodon will not be ready. I'm focusing very much on the Yankees rotation because I think it can be one of the greatest rotations ever assembled if fully healthy. And I think a lot of people are looking at that. Once you get Cole back, once you have Fried going, Rodon, Weathers, he could be another added piece. I saw him up in person when he pitched against Peralta when the Mets played the Yankees a couple weeks back, and he looked really good, but did get roughed up there too. Like, the stuff is legit, but he's now allowed 12 1/3 in 12 1/3 innings. He's allowed 16 earned runs across his 4 starts. So not good for Weathers. Aaron Boone, not too concerned, but he'll be in the starting 5 to begin the year. They just love the raw stuff, and I don't blame them. The raw stuff is legit, but got to be able to get guys out. So we'll see with the Yankees. Just quickly kind of sharing our little friends over at Fangraphs, their kind of starting projected lineup here. Kind of see it just because some of these ads bounce around. There we go. Trent Grisham, Aaron Judge, Cody Bellinger, Ben Rice, Stanton, Jazz Chisholm, Austin Wells, Jose Caballero, and Ryan McMahon will be there. And then the bench, JC Escara is projected, Paul Goldschmidt, Ahmed Rosario, and Randall Grichuk. And then the rotation begin the year, Max Fried, Cam Schlittler, Will Warren, Ryan Weathers, and Luis Heel. And in case you're wondering, we'll do it with the Mets as well, just kind of looking over this. Yes, Carson Bench is going to make the team. Mets fans at home, don't worry. I like this lineup. I'm probably going to tweet out this lineup and credit Fangraphs because I think this is pretty close to what it's going to end up being. Lindor, Soto, Bichette, Polanco, Robert, Beatty, Simeon, Benj, Alvarez. I really switch him in rock training, so I'm not going to just say that he's good to go and he's that guy. He has to prove it. Terrence, Viennes, Tachman, and Taylor is your bench. Peralta, Peterson, McLean, Holmes, and Senga is your 1 through 5. Bullpen, Devin Williams, Luke Weaver, Brooks Raley, Luis Garcia, Brazoban, Tobias Myers, Richard Lovelady, and Sean Manaea. As of now, Craig Kimbrell could still make this team, and certainly Brian Hudson could make this team. So we'll see. That's a little bit with the baseball. Let's pivot. We'll bring you some more baseball as we get ready for opening day. We'll probably give you another episode before opening day, certainly. So we'll cover that'll be probably our first base, maybe even probably second base with March Madness still being a thing. And yes, we will focus here on the Knicks real quick because Ben, the played. Real quick, Knicks played the Nets. There was like no buzz in the city, and there hasn't been buzz in the city for years. It feels like with this matchup, I just think because the Nets are so atrocious and people just don't care. I think that's a big part of it. But last night was a good game. A good game from OG, gave you 35-16. Karl Anthony Towns, 29 points in 29 minutes, 26 points, 15 boards for Cat as well. 41 minutes for Brunson, 17 points. Yeah, Ben, I just want to get your opinion quick before we wrap up, talk a little WBC and get out of here. Where do the Knicks stand? How do you feel about this game last night? Obviously, they had to sweat a little bit to beat a team that they really should be beating by 20. And what are you seeing with this Knicks team right now?
They're not where they should be in terms of their game day preparation, in how they should be playing, as you noted, against these bottom of the barrel NBA teams. Now they're 46-25 on the season, as you mentioned, Dan. A great game by OG, by Towns. OG had a decent game as well. But Brunson, he has been, I would say it's fair to say he hasn't quite been himself. He had 17 points last night, going 7 for 19 from the field. He seems to have not disappeared, but have stepped back a little bit in terms of his offensive output. And I'm wondering if that's just an issue with health. I hope not, or if it's just a issue with the offense, spacing, just a coincidence. You're going to have some down games or some brief down periods. But if this Knicks team is going to, as we say all the time, Dan, the singular goal this year is to make the NBA Finals. Anything less than that is a failure. You can't do that with Brunson putting up your star point guard, your superstar point guard, putting up 17 points. I know people might say maybe this sounds like a casual take, but you need Brunson to be the Brunson that we've seen in the playoffs of these past few years for this year's playoffs, or else it's a non-starter. To get in that kind of playoff mode, you have to start to prepare yourself mentally. And I'm wondering, is this team prepared? Are they playing their best selves? Are they playing at their highest potential at this point in the season? I mean, Tom Thibodeau, the old coach, of course, not Mike Brown. Tom Thibodeau always talked about how at the end of the season, before the playoffs, you want to be playing your best basketball of the regular season. And ironically, the Knicks kind of limped their way out of the regular season last year. The Knicks, if you remember this, Dan, I've mentioned this maybe once before, the Knicks were expected to potentially be a first or second round exit after last season. Like they had a couple of bad losses. I remember some games that I covered that they had kind of limped into the playoffs. And I remember I was overhearing, I'm not going to name him, but I was overhearing a certain reporter saying, I think they could be out in the first round, or if they're lucky, maybe they'll make it up against the Celtics and they'll get swept. And then it's going to be a rough offseason. And obviously that's, as we know, Dan, that's not what happened at all. So again, playoffs can also kind of be like a switch where you become a totally different team, Dan. But you can't just rely on that switch all the time. And look, they've got some easy teams coming up, as we can see here. You just played the Nets in a game that shouldn't have been that close, but it was nice for the city that it was good competition, competitive. You got the Wizards tomorrow. That should be an easy win. You got the Pelicans. That should also be a win. The Hornets have been better as of late. They've been a lot better, but you would expect the Knicks to pick up a win in Charlotte. Thunder is always that's going to be a tough game. Sunday, March 29th. That's going to be a really tough game.
They'll lose that game.
Yeah, I think they'll probably lose that game. You got
Rockets, they should win.
Rockets. That, remember, around a month ago, they had a game at home where they were down by, I think, as much as 18 or so, And they ended up winning that game despite a great game from Kevin Durant. So I think the Knicks can beat the Rockets. Rockets are a great team, but Knicks as finals contenders, they should beat a team like the Rockets. Grizzlies, they should beat. The Bulls, it's funny. They've struggled against Chicago in the past few years. You think the Bulls are going to be a W, but not quite. The Hawks have been hot as of late. The Hawks have been very good in terms of their offensive and defensive efficiency. When you look at the standings, let me look at the standings right now. They are rising. They're coming up through the standings. The Hawks have been 9-1 in their last 10, Dan, the Atlanta Hawks, 38-32. They're right now in the 7th spot in the East, so they're going to make the play-in. And we'll see how the Hawks do. I could see the Hawks beating the Knicks on their home floor. This team is hot right now. It's when you look at these teams, I think it's any team. That's always the mentality. Any team can beat you on any given night. And you just have to you want to leave the regular season with some good momentum. And I know that's not essential, seeing as from what we saw last season, but ideally that's what you want. Celtics, that's going to be a tough game, especially with Tatum back. And the Celtics, as we noted, as we've covered, Dan, the Celtics were very good before Tatum came back. And now this is a Celtics team the Knicks could face in the playoffs. So we don't, and they're going to have a chip on their shoulder if the Knicks face them, and somehow the Celtics are going to want that playoff victory, that series victory back. They want to snatch it right back, and they're angry when they think about the Knicks. So that's going to be a tough game. Knicks Celtics, Raptors Knicks. The Raptors have been a good team this year. They've been solid. They're 5th in the East right now, 39-30. They've gone 5-5 in their last 10, so they've been about average. But they are, I'd say, an above average team. It's totally fair to say. They got a solid roster. Shout out to RJ Barrett, of course, Emmanuel Quickly. Always have a soft spot for those guys. Knicks Hornets, that should be a win at the end of the season. You should try to get a win on your home floor last game of the season. That's my rule, just for good luck. As I've noted, Dan, none of this matters. Just to be blunt, the pressure is going to be all the way on, all the way up in this year's playoffs, because if this team doesn't at the very least make the NBA finals, it's a failure. If they don't make the conference finals, let alone win, Dan, that's going to be a massive optics failure as well. And James Dolan has noted in interviews with WFAN, I'm sure you've seen that where he's been interviewed, he thinks this team can make the finals and win the finals. And we shall see what happens.
Yeah, no doubt, man. It's going to be a fun end to the season. We'll have you covered with the Knicks. Certainly the talk of the town, can be a title contender and bring a title back to a city that needs it, man. It's been too long. Like, no disrespect to NYCFC, no disrespect to the New York Liberty. We want a championship. We want one of these big 4 teams to win it all. And the Knicks are probably the most likely. I'm not going to talk bad about the Mets or the Yankees, but we got a long time to get before that. So maybe St. John's. They're not a big 4 school, big 4 team, but hey, wouldn't that be cool, right? So
my dad's got them going all the way, Dan. So fingers crossed.
Dad's a smart man. Your dad's a smart man. Let's round third here with the Knicks. Let's get ready to head for home. Team USA got sent home in the WBC. Last time we covered it was the game against the DR. It was a great game. Juan Soto and everybody involved, Fernando Tatis, and it was a great game. And you had Juan Soto after the game say that we were the best team. And you look at some of the stats from the tournament offensively, it actually maybe does go to show that they were the best team. But at the end of the day, USA went home, and they were not the best team either. So it doesn't really matter, but I think Juan Soto was a little off in that. You can't be saying that after a loss, that you were a better team. But Venezuela was a better team than the United States in the WBC this year. And shout out to them. I got to see them very early when they played Israel in their 3rd game of pool play. It was Israel's 1st game of pool play down there in Miami. And you could tell right away it was a really, really good team. And the fans brought it. constantly having the drums going throughout the game. There was never a silent moment in the stadium. The fans were electric. They were just into the game the whole time. So shout out Venezuela, and shout out to them for winning the WBC. They have a good squad. Ronald Acuna, Luis Ariz. These are really, really good players. Michael Garcia, Salvador Perez. So you did see the electric moment. USA was shut down. They were down 2-0 going into the bottom of the 8th inning. Bryce Harper had a huge home run that put them back tied with Venezuela, and then it went into the 9th inning, and they ended up winning it on a walk-off. There was some moments, not a walk-off. USA just couldn't get it done in the bottom half, but yeah, it was just not a good showing. Not a good showing overall. Wilyer Abreu, big home run for him in that game as well. So, yeah, big home runs, but at the end of the day, USA got sent home. There was obviously some questions. Why didn't they put in Mason Miller in a tie game going into the 9th inning? I don't know. They went to Whitlock and he lost the game. So that is maybe on DeRosa, but a big part of why I don't like the WBC is because there's so many restrictions on these players. And from the Padres to Team USA, probably the Mets were doing the same thing. We saw McLean start this game. Wasn't terrible, but obviously could have been better. I don't blame McLean either. There's so many restrictions from these teams. I want to shout out John Smoltz. He had some great on the Dan Patrick show this week. How do we make the WBC better? We put it in the middle of the season. It's very simple. You just put it in the middle of the year. There's no restrictions because these guys are already going for a few months anyway. You extend the All-Star break an extra week. They play 162 freaking games. Can they get an extra week off? We see it in the NHL all the time. Like, I don't understand why that's a problem, but to some people it is. They don't want to be playing World Series games in cold November. To me, that's what the World Series is all about. I don't know about you guys. Maybe get a team from a warmer climate into the World Series and we won't have that problem. But I don't have any problem with it. Whether we start the season a week earlier, say we're having opening day tomorrow or something like that instead of Thursday, then you can add a couple more days on to the All-Star break. I don't see a problem with that. So I love the WBC. I'm a big WBC guy. I didn't like the fact that these players like Edwin Diaz a couple of years back get injured, but that's out of his control. That's out of anybody's control. So I think there's problems with the WBC in terms of insurance, and they don't want to insure these players because it's not an MLB run tournament. This is a World Baseball Classic run tournament, so they can kind of enforce the insurance policies, and it's just running into a lot of issues. So we'll see what happens. Baseball as a whole is running into a lot of issues. There will not be games in 2027. I don't know how many, but it's coming. And just buckle up for it, everybody, because just based on what I'm hearing and what I know, this is not good. The owners are very firm on their stance. The players are very firm on their stance. And you're just going to have a butting of heads that may not come to any meeting of the mind. So we will see, but Team USA, they needed to be better. Aaron Judge needed to be better. Kyle Schwarber needed to be better. Bobby Witt did his thing this tournament. Bryce Harper did his thing this tournament. Alex Bregman needed to be better. Why was Gunnar Henderson, who had the big home run with Roman Anthony against the DR, why wasn't he back playing against Venezuela? These are all questions that, I guess we'll never get answers to, but it is what it is. It is what it is. It was a fun tournament. And I think next time around, Team USA is going to be even more loaded because now I think, be my final point here, you finally got the pitchers back. That was huge. Mark DeRosa spoke about it. The fact that they were able to get the two best pitchers on the planet in Tarek Skubal and Paul Skeens pitching in this tournament, that's huge. That was not what was happening before that, right? So now that you've seen that happen, I think more pitchers down the line are going to want to pitch in this tournament. Paul Skeens already said he wants to pitch next time around. Tarek Skubal already said he wants to be committed next time around. So I think now that you have the pitchers, the hitters are always the best in this country. We have Aaron Judge. We had Mike Trout. We always will have that guy. But now the pitchers are in the fold. It's good to see. I don't like that Mike Trout was left out of this tournament. It really does not sit well with me. But it is what it is. So, yep, that's about it, guys. This was another great episode. Episode 7 of All the Bases. We'll try to get more consistent. We'll get some more graphics in there. But overall, it's been a pretty good little run here, and we're getting ready for the season in baseball to begin. We got the Johnnies, the Knicks, And Ben, it's a fun time of year.
It's the best time of year to be a sports fan, arguably. And we'll see what happens with all these teams we spoke about. It's very active time, and looking forward to all the sports we're going to see, from baseball to basketball and all the others, Dan. And another great episode with you here on a Saturday morning, or Saturday afternoon, should I add?
Yes, sir. Everybody have a great rest of your weekend. We will talk soon. Ben, enjoy the rest of your weekend, brother. And we will talk after the Johnnies play Kansas tomorrow, 5:15.